All right. Good morning, everyone. We're about to start. So if you're here, please turn on your cameras. See, let me share. Here. Okay. Well, all right. So today we're going to shift gears toward talking about the last method of research that's going to be covered. That's going to be covered in this semester, and it's going to be experimental research. Okay. And so I'm sure every one of you have heard about like the term experiments, used the name experiments, maybe did some experiments in science classes. And so what do we mean? Like we need to like define experiments in a way. So when we say experiments in research methods, what we mean is that obviously it's some sort of a experimentation under controlled conditions, right? And to give you the exact definition, so it's a test under controlled conditions made either to demonstrate a truth, examine the validity of hypothesis, and this is very important, or determine the efficacy of something previously untried. So to take like to just focus on the last phrase, so something previously untried. So for example, the vaccine, right? So the vaccine for COVID-19 or any other disease that would come up. The idea is that you do an experiment in which how to know the efficacy of a vaccine, right? So you take one group of people, you take one random sample, let them take the vaccine. Another group of people or another sample will take either no vaccine or a different version or another vaccine, and then you compare the results. Okay, so the group supposedly with the working vaccine should be less susceptible to infection, right? And you should see less hospitalization among them, lower infections, lower symptoms, etc., etc., right? So that's what we mean by like determining the efficacy of something and previously untried. In the field of communication, you can think about the same thing, right? So you say, for instance, I know like a method of commercials that would make people sign up for, let's say, gym subscription, then another method, right? If we want to test that again, okay, so let's show this commercial to a group of people and then compare it to another group of people who won't see it, and then see if the results would change accordingly, right? So the group that saw the commercials became more willing to sign up for like or like subscribe for like either like a gym subscription or a fitness club subscription. Okay, so that's like about the efficacy or like the validity of a hypothesis is like when we say it's similar, right? So you saying y changes because of x, right? And so if your hypothesis that, for instance, emphasizing the social benefits of gym subscription induces people to sign up more. So you would emphasize social benefits. So here's like a place where you can make friends, you can meet like-minded people, that you would get more access to things. That's a hypothesis, right? You're saying this is the factor X that leads to the results Y of people doing an action. And so an experiment allows you to demonstrate that, okay? Because you're comparing a state where you have an intervention, whatever it is, right? So an ad campaign, a vaccine, like a PSA or like public service announcement, or like a unique course for people. And then you want to see if that intervention will lead to the results that you're hypothesizing about. And so every experimentation has to have some sort of like manipulation of a variable, all right? And when we say a manipulation, that means there is an intervention by the researcher in changing something. That's what we mean by manipulation. So in a survey, you just want to see how satisfied are people, for example, with the remote learning, okay? You're not changing anything. You're just asking the questions. There's no intervention, okay? Whereas if you're doing experimentation, you would do some sort of like a random assignment. So you would split, say, the class into two groups. So one group will have a unique type of like educational tool. So they would do more of like interactive assignments, or they would do asynchronous, and the other group would do synchronous classes, right? You manipulated the conditions, right? And then you compare one group to the other. That's manipulation, and the goal is, for experimentation, as opposed to other methods, is to find a causal relationship. So what are the conditions of causal relationship? So if you remember, can we say back, like, I don't recall which week, but we said like causal relationship have three factors or three conditions to prove causality. Does anyone remember what are the three conditions for causality? We'll move on. What can make us say that one thing is causing the other? What do you want to see in order to say that?
X like changes Y, X affects Y.
Right. So we would say X and Y change together, right? When X changes, Y changes. Okay, that's one. But how do we know that X change Y? What's the other thing you would need? In other words, how do you know it's the X that change Y and not Y that change X? What do we need to show?
X is like independent. It's an independent variable.
Right. And how do you know it's independent? It must come what? Must come. So you want to know if X is not a result of Y. So X must come
Before.
Yeah, right. So that's that's the one. Time order, right? So causality, you have three conditions. X must precede Y in time. So X came before. So you cannot say, for instance, so if I introduce a new method of remote learning, and then I see a higher level of satisfaction with the course, I cannot say that the higher level of satisfaction caused me introducing that. It's just in the matter of time order. Is that So you have to establish a time order. So here's what people were doing before seeing the commercial, and here's what people are doing after seeing the commercial. So you have some state commercial introduced and then results, okay? So X precedes Y. X and Y must co-vary together or change together, right? So there is, so two is correlation. So you have to have correlation plus time order. So there's an actual association. And three, which is the most tricky, must demonstrate y was caused by x and not by a third variable, right? And this is the trickiest part, which is you have to rule out all of the other alternative explanations. And we call that like control for external variables or confound, which we're going to talk about more in detail discuss. But the idea is because experiments are the only way, and I would say this with a caution, the only way to demonstrate causality in research. The only way to do it is via experiments, because it's the only way in which you can show the third thing. So X must precede Y in time. You can do that through like a longitudinal survey, like you took a survey in 2 points of time. X and Y must covary together. Many methods could show that, but 3 can only be demonstrated by experiments, right? Because you're controlling for which variables are active, right? So remember the example I always give about the summer and shark attacks. So the summer season causes more people going to the beach, and hence more shark attacks. And it's also causing like more ice cream sales, right? And so if you look at when ice cream sales start to pick up, and then after it, shark attacks will start to pick up. So that's X preceding Y, and the two go up together. So that's, that's covariation together. But then are ice cream causing shark attacks or shark attacks causing people to eat ice cream? No, there's a third variable, which is weather, that caused both outcomes, right? And so for the reason we do experimentation is that we have the ability to control for external variables, right? And so imagine if we ban the sale of ice creams and people still go to the beach during the summer, you're going to witness more shark attacks, right? So that can be ruled out as an explanation. To give you like an example, if I say, for instance, and this could be a hypothesis, right, that people are less satisfied with remote learning because they are staying indoors, okay? And so if someone suggests, if people take the Zoom classes, if they say outdoor, so just go like to your yard or like near like I don't know, like swimming pool or something, you would just be more attentive. You'd actually like the class better. That's something you can do through experimentation, right? Like you assign people to be near the swimming pool, people would stay in their bedrooms, and then so you can, that external variable, right? So it's not only about staying indoor, it's about the isolation of via ice cream, via the laptop or the Zoom conference call, right? Because if it's about only staying indoor, right, then that effect should go away if people take it while they're outside. But if you see like whether you take it in your bedroom, whether you take it near your swimming pool, there's no difference, then that could be rolled out as a factor, right? So yeah, that's, you control for different external variable, establish an observable direct link. And so yeah, you introduce a commercial, and you could see that we saw what the commercial is. We could see the content, the message, the appeal, and then how people reacted. So we have something observable rather than trying to figure out what caused people to act in a certain way, right? And because you could test different alternatives. So the idea is, if you take, for example, let's look at some research we've been reading for this class, right? So some of you have done assignment 3. There was the research about, it was qualitative research. So using Instagram and body satisfaction, right? And so it was just showing like the different ways of using Instagram affect female college students' satisfaction with their bodies. But that was just observational, right? Because based on anecdotes or the narratives by the participants, you would get the impression that something in Instagram is causing users to feel body dissatisfaction. But you cannot demonstrate that until you test different alternatives. So what is it about Instagram? You need to come up with theory. Okay, so they follow a lot of body trainers or fashion influencers, lifestyle influencers who have obviously because of the wealth and the profession they are in, they have better bodies. People or viewers tend to feel more dissatisfied. Well, that's one explanation, and that could be either proven or ruled out. Because you could then say, okay, here's one group of Instagram users who would look into pictures of something else. So they would look into travel accounts only, all right? So beautiful scenes from different parts of the world, right? Like those type of accounts. Or you would look into accounts of foodies, right? And then you assign a third group to, let's say, just looking into yoga trainers or something. And so if we see differences between those three groups, all right, so we can conclude, well, it's not about Instagram as a whole. It's about a specific type of accounts that you would follow, right? So that's what I mean by different, you testing the different alternatives. So let's see what it is, right? I did research, for example, if the number of likes a post receive would make you more envious of the profile owner, right? So let's say, for example, I see I don't know, a post by Tommy, for instance, in some place beautiful beach in Costa Rica or something. I see Tommy get maybe 6 likes. Okay, no big deal. I see Tommy getting 60 likes or 160 likes. Okay, actually, I would feel more envious, right? And so by doing an experiment, okay, let's manipulate that number of likes. We could tell if it has an effect or not. Which then leads me to talk about the other thing, which is discovering the mechanisms. So experimentations allow you not only to say X causing Y, but how. So what's the mechanism by which someone's envy would increase, right? And then you can come up with different things, right? So receiving more likes induces more the sense of social belonging or social approval. So you have to have more envy of the others if they're being liked more by your peers, right? And so that's something, again, with experimentation, you could do a lot of things. You can manipulate number of likes, you can manipulate the characteristics of the person you're comparing yourself to, right? So same gender or different gender, same background or different background, same level of wealth or different level of wealth, et cetera, right? So you manipulate, and then until you settle on which mechanism caused Y to change it, caused X, sorry, to change Y, right? And so that's what experiments are all about. Yeah, it's not that you look at something and then retroactively try to look for an explanation, but you try different things, different factors in the experiments, and then see what the results will be on the outcome there, right? So in the field of communication, you can have a communication-related variable changing a non-communication variable. So we have seen before, for instance, that use of social media and then political engagement, right? So political engagement is not a communication-related variable. It's a behavioral variable related to political involvement. And then communication variable is use of social media, right? You can have a non-communication variable changing communication-related variable. So job loss and playing more video games or online video games, right? So that's one economic variable causing a more communication-related variable. Well, then you have two communication-related variables relating to one another, right? So you could say, for instance, that people who have like, let's say a higher bandwidth speed for their internet, they tend to like engage more in like video games, right? So you have better internet, you play more video games. Or for instance, you could relate social media effects, right? So imagine signing up for more social media apps tend to, for example, decrease communication or direct communication with others, right? So if you do more social media, you will tend to call people less, right? So that's some sort of like different things you could do with experiments and research. Some of the most important things you need to know, and especially, so these are terms I'm going to use a lot throughout like we have 2 weeks left, so throughout the next 2 weeks about experiments. First one is called, so there's always the condition, so something we call the condition, which is basically the group. And so as we said, experiments is about comparing two groups, one with the experimentation that you're hypothesizing would work, and then one group without. So that's dividing the sample. So you would have something we would call the treatment condition, and then the control group or the control condition. So group or condition are used interchangeably. So the treatment condition, so now this is coming from medical research, by the way. It's called treatment condition or manipulation condition. It's the same thing, which is the group would get the vaccine, all right? That's from medical research. So in communication research, we just borrowed the same terminology, but the treatment would be, okay, some group of people will watch the ad or will watch the movie or they listen to that piece of music or would read like an article from newspaper, right? That's their treatment. And you're hypothesizing that this treatment will lead to specific outcomes in the dependent variables, right? So people would read this piece of news, they would become more risk averse, okay? Or they would become more risk taking, or they have better attitudes toward immigrants or worse attitudes toward immigrants, correct? So that's the manipulation. That's the treatment they're getting, right? So that's the treatment condition. And in order to show that this thing actually works, you have to have a control group. And so the control group would be then the other half of the sample that is not exposed to the treatment. So you have a baseline, right? So if everybody watches the commercial, then how would you know if the commercial improved the attitude toward the product or not? Right? You don't have a baseline, okay? And so the control group allows you to, okay, so here, because you want to demonstrate the mechanism, right? It's not only about time order. So you're saying, okay, look, it's not only about time because the same group went through the through the same amount of time. One saw the treatment, which is the commercial or advertisement or any campaign you're broadcasting, and the other did not. Okay. Hence, we could say due to the treatment, this effect happened. Right. So that's why we need control group. So you could say you would read in different articles the control condition or the control group. That's what it means. So the group that did not see the treatment, in order to have a comparative benchmark, and then you have the treatment condition, which is the group that was exposed or experienced the stimuli. And the manipulation stimuli is basically the materials that they are going to watch or be exposed to. So the manipulation stimuli could be exposure to images from Instagram, or looking at different news pieces about the COVID vaccine, right? So, for example, because this is something that's happening in the news, if people are exposed to news pieces about the blood clotting caused by one type of vaccine, would that increase vaccine hesitancy or not? So that just watching the news is the manipulation itself or the treatment stimuli. So that's what I mean by stimuli. You stimulate a different specific response. That would be for the treatment condition, and the control group won't see that piece. They would see something else that has nothing to do with the manipulation, right? I have to say also that sometimes in some experiments, you could have two manipulations, and so you would have two comparison groups. A classic example will be, so for instance, we want to see if, I'll give you an example, sex appeal in advertising, does it work or not? Okay. You can do like one group in which they would expose to ads with sex appeal, and then another group won't see any ad, but you can also add a third comparative group, right? Which would have what? So one group would see ads with sex appeal, another group would see no ads at all, and the third group could see what? What would make sense to compare to? Anyone guess?
Maybe ads without sex appeal.
Right. Okay, yeah. So you want to see ads without sex appeal because if you compare ads with sex appeal to no ads at all, you're just comparing the effect of the presence of ads versus the absence of ads, right? So you cannot tell, well, it's about sex appeal. Well, you didn't try a different type of an appeal. So in that case, actually, you need to have ads with sex appeal versus ads with sex appeal. So because any ad would have some effect, right? So it's not about just seeing any ad, it's about seeing ads with sex appeal, right? So you would have two comparison conditions, right? Some other basic terminology, so this would be helpful if when you're reading. So in experiments, you would do random assignments. So each participant in the sample is not handpicked by the researcher to join either the treatment group or the control group. So the researcher does not handpick them and assign them like according to their own wishes to which group, or vice versa. So people don't choose which group they would like to belong to, right? So the process has to be random. The participant would be randomly assigned to either the control condition or the treatment condition. Why is that important though? So imagine the example I just gave about advertising, our advertisement. So why should not I make people choose which type of advertisement they would like to see? Why it has to be randomly assigned? One guess. Okay, let me give a different example. So let's see. Tommy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So do you play games?
Like video games?
Yeah, video games, mobile games,
Mhm.
anything.
Sure.
So what do you play?
FIFA.
Okay, so you play FIFA. Good. So imagine, okay, we want to see if, so I have an experiment, okay? And I'm saying that people who play sport games would have a higher level of enjoyment than people who would play shooting games, right? So that's my experiment. That's my hypothesis. And now I'm bringing in participants and then asking them, which game would you prefer to play? They would choose which game they play, right? So someone like you would choose to play FIFA. Another person would choose to play a shooting game, let's say Call of Duty. Then what will happen in my results? So each participant is choosing what? Choosing which game? I'm asking, if you choose the game that you already like, would you feel a higher level of enjoyment or lower?
You'd probably feel a higher level of enjoyment.
Right. Which mean my experiment would basically what?
Be biased.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah. My experiment would fail because if I want to test enjoyment and people who prefer sport games choose to play sports and people who prefer shooting games pick shooting games, then yeah, everyone would indicate a higher level of enjoyment. And so there will be no difference between the two groups, right? Yeah, it's like you pick, yeah, you enjoy it. And so I would see no variance. So I did not manipulate anything basically. So my experiment, in other words, would be useless unless I do a random assignment. And so, yeah, I force, so there are people in the sport game condition or sport video game condition who regularly play sports and who do not regularly play sport. And also in the shooting game condition, there are people who like shooting games, they play it a lot, and people who don't like. And then if one group score higher in the engagement in the post-test, right, then I can say, aha, so you see, it's not about the game the participants prefer, it's about the exact or the actual game itself, right? Hence, that's the need for random assignment. And you can think the same about advertisement effect. If I ask you, do you want to be in the group that sees the advertisement or not? Obviously, people who like advertising would say, yeah, we would like to see advertising. People who don't like it would say, no, we prefer not to see anything. And so the results will also be biased, right? Because I cannot tell if the advertisement caused people to like the product or because people like the product opt to watch the advertisement, right? Hence, you need random assignment. In experiments, and I actually mentioned that you would have something called the pre-test and post-test. So post-test is always for the dependent variables, right, or the outcomes. So yeah, you play this game, and then we're going to measure enjoyment, or measure satisfaction, or measure like fear, any type of an outcome, right? So it has to be the outcome of the stimuli, hence post-test, right? The pre-test are the questions you answer before being exposed to the stimuli. And so in some research, there would be some repetitive questions. So, and that's tricky, not always the case, like level of satisfaction, for instance, especially for long-term experiments, so level of satisfaction with remote learning, you measure it at the beginning of the semester, then you run some sort of an experiment, so you introduce some sort of like interactive content, and then you measure satisfaction at the end. So that's one. For more short-term experiments, so I just make you watch a clip, right, about a specific brand. Yeah, if I measure brand attitude before like a 30-second video, I'm sort of inducing you of what this experiment is all about. So you won't see a change in the pre and post test, right? But pre-test, you could measure other what we call subjective variables. So things like openness to experience or extroversion, introversion, any personality traits that you might think might affect the results, right? So people who are more who have like higher open to experience could prefer different type of video games, right? Or people with more, let's say, higher extroversion would prefer to play cooperative games or not. So that's something you would measure before. So when you test the results, you can compare according to these personality, individual differences or personality variables, right? So that's called by pre-test, post-test. Okay. Then, and these are also some of the terminology we use in experimental research. There's something called the factorial design, which is pretty simple, honestly. Like it's talking about how many conditions do you have in your experiments, right? There are two ways to divide it, or combination of the two. There's something called between subjects design, and then something called within subject design. All right. In between subject design is the classic experiment design I talked about. So you have one a treatment condition, one control condition, right? So this is a two, so this is a two-factor design, right? I have two groups. Let's say I have two factors. So let's say type of game, so sports versus shooter. And then I have another factor, which is individually or with a partner. So you would play FIFA with a partner against another team of two players, or you play a shooter game with, or you play individually, and the same thing in the shooter game. So that would be like a 2x2. You would read that in some research, but like they would tell you it was 2x2, like between subject design. And what they mean, they ended up with 4 groups, right? Because in our example, we would have FIFA individually, or like a sport game individually, sport game with a group, shooting game individually, and shooting game with a group, right? So you'd end up with 4 conditions, right? So they would say we had a 2x2. So they had because they had 2 factors, right? In each factor, you have 2 groups, 2x2 between subject factorial design, right? And obviously, each subject is only assigned to one condition only, right? So you're not exposed to more than one condition. So if you're the FIFA, if Tommy is in the FIFA individual group, Jared could be in the same group or in a different group, but Tommy cannot belong to more than one group, right? So that's not in the between subject design. Within subject design, hence it's within subject, it's the same subject encountering different manipulations, right? So let's say we're doing like taste testing, right? So let's say we're doing a blind taste testing. Like I bring you 3 types of burger. You cannot see the packaging. You cannot see an indicator what the brand is. And so I ask you to, you take a bite, like from each one, and then you would rate them into like some measurement variable, right? Here, the same participant is being exposed to different manipulation. So that's called within subject design. So if you have 3 burgers, that's like 3 conditions. You are being exposed to the different conditions or manipulations, in this case, eating. And then we want to see how the dependent variable will change accordingly, right? In this case, will satisfaction with the taste, right? So how did you rate the first condition or the first option? How did you rate the second option? And how did you rate the third option, right? Similarly, if you think about the like an example from communication, if, for instance, I'm exposing you to different messages about a brand, and then I'll ask you to rate those different commercials, let's say, right? So you see 4 different commercials, and you would rate each one, and we would see how each one would affect, let's say, brand attitude. So that's a within subject design. same participants, all of the participants are then just consecutively or like repeatedly are shown different treatments. You can have within subject design and between subject design in the same study. So for going back to the example about playing video games, we can make people play FIFA individually, so one player against computer, or like against someone else, and then the same players would play with one another in one team against a team of other two players. And so this is within subject and between subject design at the same time. So players who would play the sport games would play individually and in a group, and players who play the shooting game would play individually and in a group, right? So this would be 2 by 2 between subject, within subject, like a mixed design, right? So there are different ways, and it depends basically in what your experiment and the things that you want to control for are. So this is, so I have 2 videos, but basically I'm going, those, yeah, we're going to see those on like on Wednesday. So that's, I think, yeah, we can pause here. Except, yeah, so again, just to summarize what we just said. So always when we talk about experimental design, especially when you use that phrase, always notice when you read articles, so they would mention experimental design, like how many groups, if it's 1 group, 2 groups or more, right? If it's 1 group, you'd always have a pre-test and post-test, right? So you have 1 sample, they were exposed to the treatment, then you have some pause in time, and then you tested them again, right? So 1 group has to have a pre-test, post-test. 2 group, if you have 2 group, sometimes you don't need a pre-test. You can have just a post-test, right? So because you have 2 groups, 1 group would play the game and the other group will not play the game. And then you can see the effects on enjoyment. So as opposed to having 1 group testing their enjoyment before playing and then testing their enjoyment after playing, right? So you can either make it as a temporal matter or like as a group split matter. Okay, and so, okay. Josie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is the crosstab class exercise that's due today, is that an activity or is it just like participation thing that we had to complete?
It's a participation thing.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I have for lecture. Yeah, and to address, yeah, so there is, thank you, Josie, for money. Yeah, so there is something, yeah, so I will be posting more videos on Jabovi tutorials. I actually posted another one that I'm going to link to it about how to conduct t-test or comparison group. And yes, about the group project. So the group project is due the last day of the semester, right? Which I believe is, yes,
On
the last
the
day of
syllabus, it says the 19th, but when you go to the group instructions, it says the 14th.
Did I say the 4th? But the semester ends in 19th, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like on the syllabus, it'll
Yeah.
say the 19th, but when you're looking at the instructions, it says
Yeah, I think that was a mistake because of the final exam. So yeah, it's the 19th. So.
And the finals on the 19th as well, right?
What did the syllabus say?
The 19th.
That one I copied. That one is determined by the university. So I cannot. Is it the 19th or the 14th? I think it's the 14th, right?
I think I saw it on the 19th from like, and then it said 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Yeah, then that's correct, right?
Actually, it's on the 17th from 8 to 10 a.m.
You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I'm saying whatever it says in the syllabus, that's the correct one. Yeah, because I copied that one from the university's website. So I cannot, it's not determined by me. I'll send, by the way, I'll send a reminder to everyone about the finals. And by the way, because this semester is weird, there's a Monday, like the last class will be a Monday before finals week because the semester, the classes ends on Monday. So that would be a review day anyway. So we'll have time to talk about the finals in more detail. Cool. All right, so any other questions? All right, so if that's the case, I hope to see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.